This interview was filmed May 17, 2007 at KLTV Studios in Longview, Washington. I interviewed my grandfather, Harold Findlay, whose birthday is February 19, 1923. I am Jimmy Hickey, with help from Xander Jones on camera and the help from KLTV Studios in Longview. I am working with the Boy Scouts of America, working for my Eagle Project, as well as the Veterans History Project. This is the first of what I hope to have 15 interviews, which is my goal. My grandpa served during World War II. His rank was T5. He served in Europe and Northern Africa.
Okay, Grandpa, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted, along with two buddies of mine.
Okay. Where were you living at this time?
Pomona, California.
And why did you join the Army?
Well, I think it was the patriotic thing after Pearl Harbor. And we enlisted on the 27th of December. We decided to enlist only after Christmas. We were going to have Christmas before we went, but then we enlisted then.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was inevitable that there would be eventually a draft, and we all would be in the Army eventually. So let's select what we want to be in.
Okay. And so why did you pick the service branch that you joined?
Well, I joined the Air Force, and because that's what the three of us wanted to be in. The only thing wrong was they sent us to the engineers. And they didn't say why or anything else, and we thought it was boot camp, and boot camp was boot camp.
Uh-huh.
And so we went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and came back, and they said, you are now in the Air Force engineers and any other engineers that might want you. So there went the Air Force.
Grandpa, by any chance do you recall your first days in service?
First days in service, it was kind of getting uniforms and getting things that fit and all of that, and carrying it in your bag and see that you had everything you were carrying.
Mm-hmm.
But that was about all of the first days I remember.
Okay, what do you remember what it felt like at all?
I thought about that, and to me it almost reminded me of some of the things that went on in the YMCA camps that I attended as
Mm-hmm.
a kid. I'm Boy Scouts too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Tell me about your boot camp training experiences.
That was pretty much just marching, walking, going through exercises and seeing how everybody stood up under that. And I don't think there was anybody that had any problem with going through the boot camp. Was also what one does to guard duty and who you salute and when you don't salute and all the rest of it. And some of our fellows were saluting the first sergeant, and we don't do that.
I see. Do you remember any of your instructors from that time?
Yes, I remember. All of us, I'm sure, remember one who was a first sergeant, and he was the biggest guy I've seen in years, and I'm sure he must still be. And a nice guy. In fact, they were all quite nice, I'm sure, at that time.
How did you get through it, Grandpa?
Just went through it. There was no alternative. How don't you get through it? You put up with it, and you do what they say, and mostly it's learning how to march, how to get along with following instructions and following commands. There are commands that you learn, and you might as well learn them in boot camp where it almost doesn't matter, but if out in the field they would matter a lot.
Okay. And now I know you served in World War II, but where exactly did you go?
Well, you mean overseas or?
Yeah, I guess I'd say
we came
when you
back
left Pomona. Where did you go from there?
We went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and that was where boot camp was. We went down to little camp down by Long Beach, California, and then off to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Mm-hmm. And we spent about, I think it was probably 3 months there, and then back to, or 2 months there, and then back to March Air Force Base in Riverside, California, and we did a little work there, which was apparently a prelude to what we were going to do eventually. And then they camped us all up and put us on a training. We went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, 4 months later after we had enlisted.
Okay. And what other countries did you go to overseas from there?
Well, from Fort Dix, New Jersey, we went to England. And we stayed in England for about 4 months, a little over 4 months, and we were doing work on roads and airfields. The British had runways that were about 5,400 feet long, and we built them. We extended them on to 6,000 feet, a little over a mile for some of them, made them wider, cut down trees, and a lot of things like that.
Okay. Do you remember what your first job assignment was?
I think it was unloading. We were just doing grunt work, really. We were unloading cement sacks and grinding up cement and pouring down runways, and we were making the runways bigger and longer. And I think they don't tell us that, but I'm sure what it was for bombers leaving England to go to Europe. And that's what they were after.
Okay. Do you remember arriving, like, on your first day of boot camp? Do you remember what it was like? Grab a chair. For you.
First day on boot camp? I don't know, they assigned us to a barracks and to a bed and all that. It was, I would consider it just like what they would do to you in the YMCA camp or in a Boy Scout camp. They say, this is your tent, this is where you're staying, this is what you do, and you say, yes, sir, and that's what you do.
Okay, that's interesting. Did you see any combat?
I don't know. I think from who you talk to, you could be talking to, did you see combat? I kind of always looked at combat as being, I've got a gun in my hand and I'm looking at some guy way down there and he's got a gun in his hand. But so much of combat wasn't that type of thing. A lot of it was being strafed by fighter planes dive bombing down and also strafing. We had it where we were in North Africa, we had strafing all the time. Once in a while we would have artillery shots and the rest of it, but not too often. Most of it was bombing and strafing.
Okay. Were there many casualties in your unit?
No. Fortunately, we had a few, yes. We had a few that were killed by strafing and bombing, but I think we were lucky. We were far enough back to be out of the range of long-range shells, and we were close enough up behind them to be protected from a lot of the other things. So we just moved right up behind the artillery and the infantry.
Can you tell me about any of your most memorable experiences overseas?
Oh gosh, there were a bunch. Memorable experiences. I would say getting out of a bad situation would be one. In North Africa, we took probably the brunt of all of our the bad things that happened to us. We were in between Rommel's army pushing the Germans back one way and the other Germans trying to connect. And it happened to be in Kasserine. And a couple of things that were peculiar and funny there, they chased us out of there. Two of the things I remember more than anything else was we went down one time to fix a culvert that they had bombed, and we were fixing this culvert, and a Jeep went by. And I had been sent out by the captain to tell them to do something else, and when they finished that. And the Jeep that went by had a couple of stars on the front bumper. And somebody says, hey, there's a general in that Jeep. And sure enough, the Jeep stopped and backed up and came back to where we were. And George S. Patton stepped out. And he says, didn't you see the stars on that bumper? And he said, and the lieutenant, it was Dale Allison, was only a first was just a sergeant. And he said, yes, sir, and he'd saluted him. And he said, yes, sir, I'm sorry I didn't see you, sir. He said, if the stars are on the bumper, I'm in the Jeep. And so then he returned the salute, and then he walked over and asked several of the guys what they were doing and what they were after and all that, and he complimented them on putting the street back in shape. Another one at that point is about 2 weeks later, however, the Germans chased us out of Kasserine, and Patton was at that point fighting them pretty strong. But when we were chased out, we went from one camp way back to another at Uxelbanes, a little town back near the border, and we had lost 3 trucks, and we didn't know where they were. And so the captain, Captain Claude V. Peavy, said, I want you to go back on your motorcycle and try to find them and bring them here, or bring whatever they can do. So then I was going out to get on my motorcycle, and I didn't have any gloves, so he gave me his gloves. And I can remember that. I thought that was very impressive. And I drove all the way back, and when I got to Kasserine, the little city of Kasserine, there was an MP standing there all by himself, and he said, where are you going? And he says, if you're going there, you have to sign in. And that was your first of kin, the name of your company, and all the outfit and everything else. And so I said, well, I'm just going down the road about 1.5 miles. That's all the farther we were. And so I went down there and drove in our camp, and our trucks weren't there. 3 trucks weren't there. So I came back out, drove all the way back, which was about, I would guess, maybe 25, 30 miles. And when I came into camp later at night, it was dark and everything else, they said, the guys got on a different road, and they came in camp about 20 minutes after you went out of camp. Oh, that was a hard one to take. That was impressive. Another impressive one was I used to date a Catholic girl when I was back in Pomona in high school. And so I had heard that this was well into Italy, though, and I had heard that you could get rosaries blessed by the Pope. And so I bought a wooden one for me and a nice one for Millie, and went to see Pius, I think it was the 12th, Pope Pius the 12th, and we went there with one of the Italian boys that knew everything he was ever supposed to know about Catholicism, and I knew none of it. And I asked, well, now do I kiss his robe or I do what? And he says, you kiss his ring. He's the Holy Father. Oh, okay, I'll do that. And the thing that was interesting was when it was all through, he came through and he says, bless all these religious articles. He was on a sedan chair on people's shoulders carrying him in, and he touched some. And I said, he didn't touch mine. And the Italian friend of mine says, he doesn't have to touch him, he just has to bless him. I said, no, I want him to touch him. So when it was all over, there were about half a dozen guys went up there, and I jumped in line too. And I went up to him and kissed his ring and said, bless these religious articles, Father, and he did. And then he said, are you British? And I said, no, I'm American. And he said, oh, I've been to America, and only place I got to go was New York and Maryland. And I said, no, I'm from California. And he was very surprised and said, California? Oh, that must be very much like Italy. The weather and everything is just like here in Italy. And I said, no, Father, California is so much better. And he reached around and grabbed me and gave me a great big hug and said, always think of home as the best place.
Wow.
And I will always remember that comment from him. And I've heard some bad comments that made about him, and it can't be true. He was a great man, I'm sure.
That's amazing.
But those were the 3 things that I think really had impact on me and maybe changed some of the way I think about things.
Wow, those are really very interesting stories. Thanks for sharing those. Wow, it feels weird moving on from there, but were you ever a prisoner of war?
Nope. I don't know that we lost any. We lost one man to I think it was to a prisoner of war, but we never had and that was during the mine removal. Mm-hmm. And we don't know what happened to him. But other than that, no.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Well, I was a nice guy, so I got the Good Conduct Medal. And I got 5 theater medals.
Uh-huh.
Means you have performed service in 5 theaters of operation. And other than that, I didn't have any silver stars or anything like that, and not too many in our outfit, if any, did.
Wow. So, actually, we have a picture of the day you and Red.
Yeah, Red was one. That was interesting because Red and I, we enlisted with Don in the Air Force that December 27th, and Red and I stayed in the same company all that time, 5 years, 9 months.
Wow.
What a great way.
This is, if you can zoom in on this, this is a picture of the day that he got, that he was awarded
Your
his...
fingers are over.
Oh, sorry.
There it is.
Which day was this? The day that you and Red were awarded your good citation?
No, I can't
good
remember.
conduct
That was obviously in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
I would think. And he was, he's the one on the left, and I'm the one on the right.
Okay, I think that's a really great picture of you two.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're moving on to a different section on just how did you stay in touch with your family back at home?
We sent letters, but then they brought in what was called the mail, victory mail.
Uh-huh.
But the bad part about that was it was 8.5 by 11, and they took them all and laid them out and zeroed them down to about the size of a little card, sent that overseas, and then blew them up to size. So the only thing you got was you could only write a letter that was size 8.5 by 11. You couldn't write 4 pages or anything else, and you had to write so many. If you were writing to a grandparent or a friend and a gal friend or something, you'd have to write individual letters, and they would be 1 page long and no more.
Okay. Do you remember what the food was like at all?
Yes, I remember what the food was like. In North Africa, because the food was often from the British, we had things like steak and kidney pudding and oxtail stew. Oh, you'd love it. And the other one that we had was tea. We didn't have any coffee because we were all on these British rations for a long time. When we got an American ration, we always knew it because there was coffee. But they had 5-gallon cans, silver cans, and they just peel off the corner and pour in 5 gallons of hot water, boiling hot water. And then they would pour off of that into a cup, just a regular cup we have for eating, and they would fill up with tea. But the thing that happened is if you liked black tea or green tea, you didn't get it. You got what they gave you. And they gave you tea with milk and sugar in it, whether you liked it or not.
Uh-huh.
That's the way you drank your tea.
Wow. Did you have plenty of supplies there?
Yeah, I don't think we ever ran low on ammunition and we were firing at fighter planes mostly and dive bombers. We shot down a couple of dive bombers right over camp. They were coming after us and they came I don't think they were going to get us. They were after something a little bigger, I'm sure, but we nailed them, one of them in particular.
I remember when we were looking through your diary, there's a particular day that you said that today we shot down a dive bomber.
Yeah,
So that's
stupid dive bomber, yeah.
So, did you feel any pressure or stress while you were there?
I don't think any more than normal. It was normal. And you were saying, did you ever have any food problems? Towards the end of Tunisia, we were way up on Cape Bon, and the Germans were getting out of there, trying to get back to Sicily and Italy and wherever they could go. And a lot of them were going back on self-propelled gliders, 6-motored self-propelled gliders. But one thing we discovered was that you could find Luger guns in the wells of the local people. So we put hooks on them, the same hooks that you would pull landmines out of the fields, which we did an awful lot of that, and we would get guns. And we traded them to the South African soldiers for bottles of scotch. So that improved oxtail soup and steak and kidney pudding a little. Not much, but a little.
Before each day you went out, was there anything special you did for good luck?
I don't think there was. We kind of wish everybody have a good day, kind of make it on your own and duck, and if somebody hollers jump, jump, and run for the ditch. Although that's what we did riding. I was a dispatch rider, and we drove on highways a lot, trying to get out to where a platoon or a company was, and pass a message on to them. That's the only way they could get a message from headquarters. And so the best thing was to link up with either a soldier, American soldier, or even a British or a French soldier that was going the same direction, so that you could have one that was looking backwards and one that was looking forwards, so that you had 3 sets of eyes or 2 sets of eyes looking, because if someone was coming to strafe you, you would never hear them if you were driving down the road on a motorcycle.
Okay, and just to fill the gaps in here, you were in the engineers and then you became a dispatch rider. I understand there's a story behind that when you volunteered to do that?
Yes, I did that. Well, I don't like to tell that story too much. But it was when I was in England, we were lifting great big heavy sacks of cement, and somebody said, why don't you become a dispatch rider, and then you can just drive the motorcycle around all the time. So I said, yeah, and there was a guy in the outfit that knew how to drive it. And so he told me how to drive a motorcycle, and when they wheeled out these 3 motorcycles, one for each platoon, and in our company, and I stepped forward, and Red grabbed me by the arm and pulled me back and said, what the heck are you doing? You don't know how to drive a motorcycle. I said, don't tell them, they don't know, they don't know. And so I got a hold of it, I got on the motorcycle and started the motorcycle up, and this guy had turned to me and told me how to drive it and everything. And he said, remember, you have to turn the spark on. And so I didn't do that. I forgot about it. And so I was stomping down, and finally nothing happened. I was afraid the first sergeant was going to say, do you know how to drive a motorcycle? And Fournier was his name, and he leaned over and he says, half the time those sparkers don't even work. And I thought, sparkers? Oh yeah. And I turned the handle and stamped on it, and it took off. And I drove around, I got off, and he said, okay, drive around, the 3 of you, drive around, and then drive down the roadways. So we went around, and as we got out of sight of these guys, I ran into the rear end of a Quonset hut. But wow. Nothing happened. Everything worked, and I got back on it, and we kept going. I learned to drive a motorcycle.
And back to the life segment, just got a little sidetracked there. I got you sidetracked. Were there any entertainers there?
Not in Africa, and we had Bob Hope, and we had several. I liked him. He came over with a couple of them. But we had several of them at one time. We saw Frank Sinatra one time. Ooh. And he was over I think in Sicily. Mm-hmm. But not too many. They would never be on the front lines like in Africa and the first part of Italy.
And so how did you guys entertain yourselves?
Played cards. And there wasn't a problem with entertaining ourselves in the first part, the first North Africa and all that. We were on the move enough you were just occupied with being where you were going and where were you going in the next morning. But when we were in Italy, you were kind of slowing down, and mm-hmm. then there was a little free time, and so, well, it was a little more time, but it was maybe checkers or maybe things like that, but mostly cards.
What did you do when you went on leave?
Well, not much. We'd usually go someplace and eat some good Italian food. But we'd go to a museum. Unfortunately, we'd go to a couple of museums, like when we got to go up into Rome and all that where there were classic art pieces and both paintings and art sculpture. And we knew nothing about it, and then 20 years later we learned it in art class, what fame, and we remembered that's the one I saw. But that was interesting too.
We kind of already covered this, but where did you travel while in your services?
To those 4 areas: England, Algiers, Tunisia, Sicily, and Italy. And then we went back down, and we're going to be put on some boats and head for the Pacific Theater, because the European theater had ended first, and they thought they could use this maybe in India, building runways to bomb the Japanese that way. But by the time we got down there and everything loaded up, it was time to come home, so they said go, and we did.
We also already kind of covered this, but do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events that happened during your service?
Oh, there were a lot of things you always had a joke about or laugh about, something. But no, we didn't have enough bad things that happened that dampened our spirits for anything. But no, I can't think of any special one in that way. There was a few, sure, and we all joked about it. And things like that. We took pictures, and some of them were stupid pictures of lying on piles of mines. But
oh, that is something I want you to explain. That is a terrific story of mine. That just what you guys would do with the mines once you would dig them out.
Well, we took out most of the mines in North Africa, and it was mostly up in Tunisia, Sicily, and on above there. And the Germans were fantastic mine layers. Even we did that a couple of times in fields that they mined. But they could put down a pattern and then turn it and turn it and turn it as it kept going on, and they were perfect. But the Teller mine was a big anti-tank mine, and they had so many of them bringing them back from Egypt that they just decided to put them down and blow up anything that was American coming through there. So we went in and pulled them out. But they had on the bottom of it where they could put a trigger. So when you reached to pull it out of the ground, it would set off a trigger and blow you up instead of a tank. And so what we did is we just made ropes with hundreds of hooks on the end of them, and then we'd hook them to the thing and walk back maybe 150 yards and pull them out of the ground that way. Several of us would just start pulling. And if it was going to blow up, it would blow up at our pulling. And I think we must have pulled out 10 days worth and got none that blew up. So from then on, we just took it. The key to the Teller mine is the trigger. There's I think it's either 7 or 11. I think it's 11 pounds of TNT in it. But the key is the trigger of that, the fuse that starts that. So you always take that out, and you're very careful where you put it because it can go off.
And you just had after this, you usually would have piles and piles of them.
Piles of mines.
Piles of.
Yeah. Then they were never going to go off unless they had a trigger, and the triggers were 100 yards away. We wouldn't keep them anywhere near each other.
So that's what you mean by taking the pictures of people.
Yeah, a picture laying out on a big stack of mines.
Wow. That was really fascinating. Yeah. Were there any other pranks or anything else like that you'd pull on the other people?
No, I can't think of it. I remember one, Dombrowski. We had a fellow who was a demolition expert. And he found a river someplace in Italy, and he would take 4-pound blocks of TNT and go out and drop them in this river And that night, we had fish to eat. And he would bring back a whole big armload and bag load of fish.
Wow.
Which I'm sure the local people were not too happy with, but that was fun.
And the next question is, do you have any photographs? And there's a smaller amount of pictures, but here's what we have. If you could please just describe if you remember this. This is a picture of you just kind of looking at it. I think that's a terrific picture. That's definitely my favorite.
That's one in North Africa, and I don't know what I'm putting up on my head, but no, that's just that's me just getting old.
The next picture is, I think, yeah, that's you looking. No, I'm just kind of looking off.
That one's one my buddy Dale Allison took a picture of me. And I think what we're looking at is a plane going by and wondering, is it one of ours or one of theirs?
The next one, I think it's of you in red again.
Oh yeah, I don't know, let me see that one. Yeah, that's Dale Allison. He's a sergeant.
Dale Allison.
Yeah, he was a good buddy of mine too, since passed away, but a real great buddy of mine. And
here's just another picture of you.
Oh yeah, now we're up in Italy. Dark hats, out of the desert.
Oh wow, I didn't notice this. Is this a picture of you and
Dale?
This is.
I don't know, it's just joking around.
But if you can see up here, there's a plane flying in the background.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat that you got that in there.
That may have followed one of the earlier ones, looking to see whether it was one of the good ones or the bad ones. And often what would happen is a plane would come sailing through past us, and it would be an American plane chasing a German plane in North Africa, and our guys wouldn't know it, and they'd start shooting. And so everybody would start screaming about stop, 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 because we didn't want to shoot down one of our own planes.
And this is the very last picture that we have. It's you leaving, it's of you leaving a tent.
Yeah, that was in Foggia, Italy, because up until that time, we hadn't been in tents. Everybody was, if you're in the Air Force, you got a tent, but not if you were in engineers. And we spent all our time in North Africa in pup tents, and digging holes in the ground and putting the pup tent over the top of it, so if we were bombed or anything. But we got in, those were pyramidal tents, and that would sleep about 8 people, 10 people in it. And it had a fireplace if they needed it. So we just enjoyed that.
I guess a question that isn't on here, but I'd like to know about is, what were the sleeping conditions for you like?
Sleeping conditions?
I guess you just described there, but how about like in North Africa?
Yeah.
Well, do you remember what they were like at all?
Yeah, when it got dark, you went to bed. That's like what your mom says when you're little. Go to bed, it's dark. And so, no, it was, I don't know, there was not that much. There was some night fighting, that's true, but we didn't experience too much of that. And most of that would have been around major cities, and we were trying to build airfields for planes. We built a lot of airfields for planes that were running out of gas. One of the best airfields we built was we took out tractors and jeeps and motorcycles and anything and lined them up on this, and it's called the Palm Sunday Massacre. I've been trying to find it in certain books, but I haven't been able to lately. But it's where we shot down, I don't know, or we didn't shoot down, this P-40 group of pilots shot down lots of 6-motored self-propelled gliders, which means they could carry 2 tanks and I don't know how many men, gobs of men, and behind each engine was a man seeing that the engine flew. And then there was a guy flying it. And they could just take great quantities of people and equipment in those things, but it had to be towed off of the ground. You'd put a plane, two planes in front of it, and tow that plane up in the air off the ground, that glider. And once you got it to its normal height, it can maintain that. So when you wanted to shoot it down, what would you do? You'd shoot out one engine. That's all you had to go after. And once you shot that one engine, the plane would slowly go sideways. And they were going out over the Mediterranean trying to get back to. Well, they kept that up until they just didn't have any gas or anything. And so we had a field we were building for them. We just went out there and lined up planes, and they were coming in sputtering. The engines were sputtering. A couple of them landed a mile or so before they ever got to us, and some of them just coasted down the field and ran off on the side when they were out of gas. And it was just a great experience for those guys.
And so at night you brought out all the vehicles that had headlights and
Had the headlights
you had
on.
lights so you could see the run. So they could
We
see the
didn't
run.
care. We didn't care if anybody saw it above, but because those guys were coming back with no place to land. They would have been back earlier.
That's fascinating that you guys all came together. And one last, this would be a good time to show this photograph that we have, is this huge picture of the entire, is it the entire company?
Yeah.
And you were somewhere in the middle of it.
Yes.
No, way, way back.
Yes. You can find it if you look hard. That was taken in, I think that was in Fort Dix, New Jersey, before we left to go over, because of, I can tell, because of those tents. And there's those in the front are some of the lieutenants and sergeants and platoon sergeants and all of those. I can remember their names if they were in A company.
It's really fascinating how you penciled in people's names on here.
Yeah.
And you're able to identify, when you're looking at this to try to find you, you're able to identify where you were by the people you were next to.
Oh, there's your names down below. You can see those.
So I think that's just a fascinating picture of all you guys together. Is this the only known photograph that you have of everyone in your company? Or is this the only time you guys all came together for it?
I think that's the only one we have. You can drop that. Yeah, so off the picture. Yeah, I don't think we had the company together, because often what would happen was the company would go out to various areas, and if you had if the whole company was there, you had in that company you would have 4 platoons, and they would be often here and there and scattered all over the place. We got back later.
So that's a great picture. I really like that one. And it really illustrates just how young you guys really were for that, and how much older than me, and you were over there fighting. Okay, and the next question is, did you keep a personal diary? And
well, I didn't. And then my grandmother sent me a diary, and I kept it for a while and filled things in, but you know, it was one of those things, you had to have the time, and you had to be back in your tent, and you had to be able to get a pencil or ink and do it. But my diary has things in it, but it's not well kept.
Yeah, and we will finish this off by reading a passage from that diary that is, I think, really touching. So now we're moving on to after the service. Do you recall the day your service ended and what you were doing?
Yes, they took us on a boat to Virginia, flew us from Virginia to Sacramento, California, gave us, I think, $130 or something, and said goodbye. After they had said, would you like to join the reserves? And I said, who runs it? And they said, the military. And I said, I served in the military. No. And they gave me the $130. And I hitchhiked a long way because I couldn't get a bus.
Oh, wow.
And Sacramento down to Southern California. But that wasn't too bad. It took me a day and a half.
Jeez. Okay. Well, I didn't know you had to hitchhike that far.
Well, we could have waited for a bus. They gave us some money for tickets for a bus, but I figured if the bus isn't there and they're all sold out, it'll be 3 days before I can get going, and I could hitchhike and might be able to. And everybody, they're real good to soldiers. They'd pick a soldier up, and you weren't carrying a rifle, so why not?
Wow. What did you do in the days and the weeks afterward, upon your return back to the United States?
Oh, went to see family because I hadn't talked to them personally or seen any of them. visited with relatives, and finally got to sitting down with a few of them saying, what are you going to do? Okay, you know how to ride a motorcycle, now what are you going to do? So then I decided we were going to go to college, and the GI Bill was there, so I went.
That covers the next two questions.
Oh.
Did you go back to school? You went to
Yes.
college, and the GI Bill was there?
Yes, and so I went on the GI Bill, which was one of the best things I think the veterans got out of who came back, if they wanted to take advantage of it.
And I remember the story that you told about just how the some high person in the school district was really didn't think that it was a great idea until they went through they went to the schools for the 4 years, and he realized that everyone was a hard worker, and everyone. Can you share that story if you remember it?
Well, the one I remember in particular is an aunt went with me to the college that I wanted to go to, and the dean of admissions was a nice guy, but he looked at me and he looked at my record and he said, well, in high school you obviously weren't too caring about what kind of a grade you got, and you didn't want to get too much, and so your grades are pretty lack here. So he said, well, if you go back to the last year of Pomona Junior College before it became Mount San Antonio, and he said, if you take a year's algebra in 9 weeks, a year's geometry in 9 weeks, a year's chemistry in 18 weeks, and a year's English and something else in 18 weeks, and you get B or better, you can come on to Pomona College. So I said, okay, and I went. And then I had an aunt who went back with me on this, and he was about ready to say no before he even said go to this junior college. And she said, oh, by the way, if Harold is admitted, he'll be the 26th member of the Findlay family to attend Pomona College. I think the dean of admissions thought of maybe a few bucks coming into the student fund and the rest of it. So he wasn't too stupid. He said, okay.
Wow.
And I worked my fanny off too.
That's fascinating. So the GI Bill was a really great thing.
Yes, and there were a lot of us too. There were several in my class and the class ahead of time and the class behind, because some of those guys went out of their class to go into the military. And when they came back, they went back in and were paid for it.
Wow. Now, did you make any close friendships while you were in the service?
Yes, some, but you got to remember they're gone now. I was one of the youngest of the men. I had a friend, Baju Shefchik, who is now named Walter Seawick, and he's since passed away and was a great guy. And his mother used to send him kielbasa, and was it great? Polish sausage. Boy, it was really great. And then there were a few others that we made. Dale was a good friend, and there were just a lot of guys that were good friends there. But then when you come back and they were living in Texas, or they were living in Maine, or they were living in the Midwest someplace. I can remember Weber, who was on a farm in Michigan. I wouldn't know where to find Weber, although I've gone back to several of the reunions. And the last reunion we had was at Niagara Falls, I think.
Oh, really? When was this?
This was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And we didn't have a lot at that reunion, but there were a few and their wives, and there were a lot of letters of people that would have liked to have come but couldn't come. And I can understand why. We're getting old. There's not a vitamin that says for veterans.
So you didn't really continue to enlist because it was difficult too. And so did you join a veterans organization?
No. And a lot of my friends did, and I think the reason I didn't was because I went to work for a company that moved me around a lot. and I was more on the move than I was on the ability to stay and I think of veterans, either of the veterans of foreign wars or the American Legion or so many of those would be great, but you should be in a town where you know the people and you're going to stay there for a while. Mm-hmm. And I never got that way for a long, long time. I kept moving.
I see. And what did you go on to do as a career after the war?
Went into sales management. I went to work for Carnation Company in the fresh milk and ice cream division, mm-hmm. and which is now owned by Nestle, no longer Carnation, darn it. But they have, it was a good company to work for. I liked them, and they were basically good people working for them too. Uh-huh.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Oh, I don't know that it couldn't help but influence you some way. I wouldn't think that maybe some have been influenced to the negative side, but I don't think too many. And I think some of our fellows, we may have gone on the outside to a different way, but no, I think most of us were influenced by the goodness of the people we were serving with. They were good friends.
So how did your service and experiences affect your life?
I would like to think that it didn't make me want to be a long-time military man, but I thought I was proud of what I did, and so I think so many of the people that were with us were proud of what they did, and some of them, like we were initially, would have said, oh, we could have done a lot more if we'd gone into the Air Force. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe not, but you go into the service and you do a good job and you see that it pays off and it has its rewards and it saves other people too. So that was happy.
Is there anything else that you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
Well, I'm sorry to see so many American flags in the obituary column, which means there are a lot of our guys that maybe are just getting up there in the years, and maybe they were deprived of some things back in the service days that could have helped them a little bit, or I have no idea. But I wish we'd linger on a little longer. We got things, we got grandchildren and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's one thing why I love this project, is that we are able to expand the stories of the veterans and everything that they've done. And so moving on from there, we just have a few things to show. This is a wallet.
Yes.
Did you make this wallet?
Yeah.
And inside it, there's a letter from you, or I guess a note from yourself, and it says, I made this in England, and I burnt in some of the places I've been. Harold.
Oh.
And it's on a United States Army piece of paper.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can see it from here, but going down this all the way, it just says different places.
Nope, don't show too much. Fort Nix, New Jersey, I can see. Liverpool, I can see. Yeah.
And then inside there's just a few more, and it says Finn, Pomona, California.
Yeah, let me see that. I was just wondering about what's the last one. Oh, yeah, we were in Euxla-Baines. That was in a winery in Algiers, Euxla-Baines, Kasserine Pass, and Ain Baida. We were getting pretty busy about that time. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't out there in the sunlight bringing the new names in. I just stuck it away someplace.
And this is, in my opinion, this is the most fascinating thing that you have right here with you. Is it called Funny Money?
Well, we call it Funny Money.
And can you please explain the story behind this? I think this is just amazing.
Well, those are pretty true-looking money that we would have, and most of the people in the group would have known that in Algiers or in Tunisia or any place where we were. But what this was it was money that the Germans had used, had copied and made into look like what we would give them on one side, counterfeit, and on the other side it says in Arabic or whatever their language they were using, what bunch of bums we really were and what a bad thing we were going to do for them. So as you can see, that isn't in English on the back side, it's all in
And here's, oh, here, now it's the, these are in pounds now, not instead of
yeah,
dollars.
they did it also in pounds because the British were bringing those. And they just threw them out of airplanes and they fell down, and I just happened to pick a few up.
It's raining money.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Strange money.
If I remember correctly, this is just a little, like, a note from the Italians and the Germans. And
Yeah. Yeah. Swastika and the Italians.
And now I think it's time to go to our closing. If you could please read a section from your diary. I think this is
Okay.
just
What is it?
amazing what you said here.
Oh. We traveled, oh. Today was my birthday, and if I hadn't been keeping this diary, I would never have known it. I am now 20 years old, February 19, 1943.
Wow.
That February 19th in 1943, we would have been in
Wow.
Tunisia, before we got chased out.
Well, Grandpa,
Yeah, I'll have to read this sometime. Yeah.
thank you very much for taking the time to do this interview
Sure.
with me.
Surely. Thank you.